You're lucky I even let your kind walk through these doors." The words snapped through the gleaming lobby as CEO Ethan Vale glared down at the elderly janitor, Harold Whitaker, hunched over his mop. To him, Harold was just another invisible worker, frail, slow, beneath notice. But arrogance blinded him. When Ethan's hand struck Harold's face, a delivery driver's phone caught everything. By morning, the world had seen it. Headlines blazed, investors panicked, and the deal worth $300 million vanished overnight, taking Ethan's empire with it. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The morning sun streamed through Bright Path Systems' wall-to-wall windows, casting long shadows across the sleek office floor. The open workspace hummed with activity. Keyboards clicking, phones chirping, and the soft murmur of professional conversation. Workers in pressed shirts and neat blouses moved between gray cubicles, their shoes clicking against the polished marble. Near the break area, Harold Whitaker worked methodically with his mop, his movements precise after decades of practice. His blue janitor's uniform was as crisp and clean as any executive's suit. Rosa Delgado stood nearby, checking their cleaning schedule for the day. "You know what gets me, Harold?" Rosa said quietly, adjusting her supervisor's badge. "How they want everything spotless, but act like we're invisible." Harold nodded, dipping his mop in the bucket. "Been that way 40 years, Rosa. Clean enough to see their reflection, but they look right through us." The elevator chimed its arrival, and Ethan Vale burst out of his corner office like a storm cloud. His expensive suit couldn't hide the tension in his shoulders, his face already flushed from what everyone knew had been a difficult board call. Workers ducked their heads as he passed, not wanting to catch his eye. Harold continued his steady mopping, creating neat, gleaming paths across the floor. Ethan's sharp footsteps approached rapidly, heading straight for the freshly mopped section. Before Harold could call out a warning, Ethan's Italian leather shoe hit the wet surface. The CEO's foot slipped, and he stumbled, catching himself, but losing his composure entirely. His face twisted with rage as he turned to Harold. "You people can't even keep a damn floor clean?" Ethan's voice carried across the suddenly quiet office. The words, "you people," hung in the air like poison. Harold's weathered hands tightened on the mop handle, but his voice remained steady and dignified. "Sir, I keep this place clean so it can shine for people who never look down." The silence deepened. A few brave souls peeked over their cubicle walls. Near reception, Jax Murphy, a young delivery driver in his company uniform, slowly raised his phone, sensing the tension in the air. Ethan's face flushed a deeper red. His expensive watch caught the sunlight as he stepped forward, closing the distance between them. The slap came fast and hard, a crack that echoed off the glass walls. Harold's wire-rimmed glasses flew from his face, skittering across the floor he'd just cleaned. A young analyst in a nearby cubicle let out an audible gasp. Other workers froze, phones forgotten in their hands. Harold stood very still, a thin line of blood beginning to trickle from his nose. Each drop fell onto the white marble floor, a stark contrast against the pristine surface. Ethan loomed over Harold, his chest heaving, momentarily shocked by his own action. But there was no remorse in his eyes, only continued rage and something darker. A glimpse of satisfaction at the blood he'd drawn. Rosa's clipboard clattered to the floor as she rushed to Harold's side. Her hands shook as she reached for him, her face a mixture of fury and concern. Around them, dozens of witnesses remained rooted in place, their faces showing horror, shame, and fear. Jax Murphy kept his phone steady, capturing every second. His young face was set in grim determination, even as his hands trembled slightly. Ethan's eyes darted around the office, taking in the shocked faces of his employees. His gaze locked onto Jax's phone, and his upper lip curled in contempt. "Delete that footage," he snarled, "or you'll regret it." He turned on his heel, storming back toward his office, each footstep echoing like a gunshot in the dead silence. The threat hung in the air, heavy and unmistakable. Rosa knelt beside Harold, her voice barely above a whisper. "Harold, I'm so sorry. We need to call someone. The police. A doctor." Harold's eyes never left Ethan's retreating back. A lifetime of dignity and restraint showed in his posture, even now. Blood continued to drip from his nose, each drop joining the small crimson constellation forming on the floor beneath the gleaming Bright Path logo. "Don't delete it," Harold whispered, his voice carrying in the silence. The words weren't just for Jax. They were for everyone watching, everyone who had seen and said nothing for too long. The office remained frozen in that moment. Sunlight continued to pour through the windows, highlighting the scene like a spotlight on a stage. Phones lay silent in their cradles. Printers hummed quietly in the background, and dozens of witnesses stood in stunned silence, watching as an old man's blood stained the pristine floor of their workplace, marking the spot where something fundamental had just shattered beyond repair. The late afternoon sun filled Harold's modest kitchen with warm light, casting long shadows across the well-worn linoleum floor. He sat at his small round table, holding an ice pack to his swollen cheek. The familiar surroundings, the faded curtains his late wife had sewn, the old coffee maker gurgling in the corner, the neatly arranged magnets on the refrigerator, seemed to mock the dignity he'd lost hours before. Rosa sat beside him, her work uniform still crisp despite the day's events. Her fingers drummed nervously on the wooden table as she checked her phone for the 10th time. "Dana should be here any minute," she said softly. "I told her everything." Jax Murphy paced the small kitchen, his delivery uniform rumpled, his young face tight with anxiety. He kept glancing at his phone as if it might explode in his hand. "Mr. Whitaker? I don't know about this. Ethan Vale. He's got lawyers, connections. He'll come after me. My job." Harold lowered the ice pack, revealing the angry red mark across his cheekbone. "Son," he said quietly, "sometimes doing nothing costs more than doing something." The screen door creaked open, and Dana Whitaker burst into the kitchen. Her business suit was slightly disheveled, her legal briefcase clutched tightly in one hand. The moment she saw her grandfather's face, she froze. "Grandpa," she whispered. Then her expression hardened. "I'm going to destroy him." Harold reached for his granddaughter's hand. "Dana, calm down. We need to think this through." "Think what through?" Dana's voice rose as she set her briefcase down with a thud. "He assaulted you, in front of witnesses. And you're sitting here with an ice pack while he's probably drinking champagne in his office." Jax stopped pacing, his phone gripped tightly. "I got it all, the whole thing. But if I post it..." He swallowed hard. "My mom's sick. I need this job." Dana turned to him, her attorney's mind already working. "Show me." Jax handed over his phone, and they all watched the footage in silence. The video was crystal clear, the morning light streaming through Bright Path's windows, the neat rows of cubicles, the shocked faces of co-workers, Ethan Vale's rage-twisted face as he struck Harold, the blood dropping onto the pristine marble floor. "This needs to go public," Dana said firmly. "Now." "But," Jax started. "Listen to me," Dana interrupted, her voice softening. "We can post it anonymously. I'll help you set up secure accounts. Bright Path won't be able to trace it back to you." Rosa leaned forward. "She's right, Jax. I've worked there 30 years. They only understand public shame." Harold watched the discussion, his weathered hands folded on the table. When he spoke, his voice was tired but determined. "All my life, I've kept my head down. Worked hard. tried to set an example. He touched his swollen cheek gently. Maybe it's time for a different kind of example. Dana squeezed her grandfather's shoulder, then turned back to Jax. Let me help you set this up. We'll use VPNs, new accounts, everything untraceable. The next hour was a flurry of activity. Dana's fingers flew over Jax's phone, creating anonymous profiles, establishing digital dead ends. Rosa made fresh coffee while Harold watched silently, the ice pack melting on the table. When they finally posted the video, it felt anticlimactic. Just a soft click, then silence. But within minutes, the notifications started. Share, share, share. The numbers climbed rapidly. Hashtags appeared spontaneously. Hands off Harold, Chanter slap of privilege, Chanter bright path shame. The video spread across platforms like wildfire, each share accompanied by outraged comments. By early evening, local news stations were running the footage. National outlets picked it up within hours. Every replay showed the same damning scene. The powerful CEO in his dark suit, striking an elderly janitor in blue, surrounded by stunned office workers, the mop trembling in Harold's hands. BrightPath's PR team scrambled, releasing a statement calling the incident an unfortunate misunderstanding during a moment of workplace tension. Social media erupted with scorn. The image was too clear, too raw. The marble floors, the glass walls, the witnesses, the blood. There was no spinning this away. Rosa's phone buzzed with messages from co-workers. "Everyone's sharing it," she reported. "Even people who never speak up." "Good," Dana said firmly, watching another news segment analyze the footage. "Let them see. Let everyone see." The kitchen grew darker as evening settled in, but none of them moved to turn on the lights. They sat together, watching their phones, as the story grew bigger with each passing hour. Then Dana's phone rang, a contact from the city procurement office. She answered, listening intently, her expression shifting from surprise to satisfaction. "They've suspended BrightPath's hospital contract," she announced after hanging up. $300 million, frozen pending an ethics investigation. Jax slumped in relief. "So it worked." "It worked," Dana confirmed, then added grimly, "for now." In his glass-walled penthouse across town, Ethan Vale stood before a wall of windows, watching the city lights flicker on. Multiple screens behind him played news coverage of his violence, his face frozen in that moment of rage again and again. The crystal tumbler in his hand shook slightly as he watched his company's stock price dropping in real time. "They'll pay for this," he muttered, draining his glass. "All of them." Morning sunlight crept across Harold's front lawn, illuminating the crowd of news vans and reporters that had transformed his quiet street into a media circus. Microphones bobbed like strange flowers as journalists jostled for position on his small concrete porch. Camera lights blazed through his living room windows, casting harsh shadows across his family photos. Inside, Harold stood at his kitchen window, watching the chaos unfold. He wore a clean-pressed shirt despite his injuries, his dignity intact even as his privacy crumbled. The bruise on his cheek had darkened overnight, a purple testament to yesterday's violence. "You don't have to talk to them," Dana said from behind him, already dressed for court in a sharp navy suit. "We can wait them out." Harold shook his head slowly. "Can't hide forever. Hiding's what they want." Across town, BrightPath's gleaming office tower hummed with nervous energy. In the open-plan floor where yesterday's assault had occurred, employees whispered behind computer screens and ducked into break rooms for hurried conversations. Security guards in dark uniforms methodically moved through the space, tearing down printed screenshots of the viral video and handmade signs demanding Ethan's resignation. The elevator dinged, and conversations died mid-sentence. Ethan Vale stormed onto the floor, his expensive suit perfectly pressed, but his face tight with barely controlled rage. Behind him trailed a cluster of PR executives and legal advisors, all clutching tablets and speaking in urgent undertones. "I want every copy of that video scrubbed from our internal servers," Ethan barked, not slowing his stride. "And get me the security footage from every angle. Now!" Workers kept their heads down as he passed, but their eyes followed his movement. Where Harold's blood had stained the marble floor, a cleaning crew worked frantically to restore the shine. In a glass-walled conference room, Ethan's PR team huddled around a laptop. Their lead specialist, a sharp-featured woman in her 40s, gestured to the screen. "We've edited the security footage," she explained, her voice carefully neutral. "Watch." The doctored clip played smoothly, showing Harold apparently lunging toward Ethan first, the mop handle rising threateningly. The actual slap appeared almost defensive in this false context. It was skillfully done, each frame manipulated to create a completely different narrative. Ethan leaned back, a cold smile playing at his lips. "Perfect. Get it out there. Internal channels first, then leak it to friendly media outlets. Make sure our people understand this is the real story." Back at Harold's house, his ancient landline phone rang again. He reached for it automatically, but Dana intercepted the call. "Hello?" Her professional tone quickly hardened. "Who is this? Listen here." But the line went dead. Dana slammed the receiver down, her hands shaking slightly. "Third anonymous call this morning. Just breathing and threats." Harold sat heavily in his kitchen chair. "They want me to stay quiet." "Let them try to silence us," Dana growled, pulling out her phone. "I'm filing defamation suits against Brightpath and Vale personally. We'll drown them in paperwork." The doorbell rang. Rosa this time, slipping in through the back door to avoid the media frenzy out front. Her usually neat uniform was wrinkled, her face drawn with worry. "It's getting bad at work," she reported, accepting a cup of coffee from Harold. "Management's going floor to floor, telling everyone not to talk to reporters if they want to keep their jobs. They're showing some video, saying you attacked first." "That's impossible," Dana cut in. "We have the real footage." "They're scared," Harold said quietly. "Can't blame them. Bills to pay. Families to feed." The day dragged on. Reporters eventually thinned out as bigger stories broke elsewhere. By late afternoon, Harold insisted on doing his own grocery shopping despite Dana's protests. "Can't live in fear," he said firmly, grabbing his keys. "Need milk." The local grocery store was quiet, fluorescent lights humming overhead as Harold pushed his cart through familiar aisles. He filled it methodically. Bread, eggs, the instant coffee he'd grown used to since his wife passed. His cheek throbbed dully under the store's harsh lighting. The parking lot was nearly empty when he emerged, pushing his loaded cart toward his old Buick. The sun had set, leaving only the dim glow of distant streetlights. He was reaching for his trunk release when he heard footsteps behind him. Before he could turn, something hard struck the back of his knee. Harold stumbled, groceries spilling across the asphalt as two masked figures emerged from the shadows. They wore dark hoodies, their faces hidden behind generic Halloween masks. "Should have kept your mouth shut, old man," one growled, landing a vicious kick to Harold's ribs. The other attackers spat racial slurs as they continued their assault. Harold tried to protect his head, but blows rained down from all angles. Through the pain, he heard eggs cracking, milk spilling. His mop, he always kept one in his trunk, clattered to the ground beside him. The attack felt endless, though it probably lasted less than a minute. As Harold's vision began to blur, he saw his own blood mixing with spilled milk on the dark pavement. The last thing he heard was more slurs, then running footsteps fading into the night. He collapsed beside his fallen mop, surrounded by scattered groceries, alone in the empty parking lot. Morning sunlight filtered through the Venetian blinds in Harold's hospital room, casting striped shadows across his bruised face. The steady beep of monitors provided a quiet rhythm to match his breathing. His right eye was swollen shut, and white bandages wrapped his ribs where the kicks had left their mark. Dana sat in the hard plastic chair beside his bed, her hands clenched into fists on her lap. She hadn't slept, hadn't changed out of yesterday's suit. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, but the rage burning within them was razor-sharp. The door creaked open slowly, and Rosa slipped in. She carried a paper cup of coffee that she wordlessly handed to Dana before pulling up another chair. "How is he?" Rosa whispered, her eyes fixed on Harold's battered face. "Stable," Dana replied through gritted teeth. 3 broken ribs, concussion, internal bruising." She took a shaky breath. "The doctor says he's lucky they didn't kill him." Rosa's hands trembled as she reached for Harold's. "I saw something last night, going through security footage from the parking lot." She glanced nervously at the door before continuing in an even lower voice. "One of the attackers. When he turned, his jacket rode up. I saw a Bright Path security badge clipped to his belt." Dana's coffee cup crumpled in her grip, hot liquid spilling over her fingers. She didn't seem to notice the burn. "Are you sure?" "I'd stake my life on it," Rosa nodded. "It was the new style badge, too, the ones they just started using last month." Harold stirred slightly, his good eye fluttering open. "Dana?" His voice was rough, barely above a whisper. "I'm here, Grandpa." Dana leaned forward, carefully taking his hand. "You're safe now." "They wanted to send a message," Harold said slowly. "Make an example." "Well, they made a mistake." Dana stood, straightening her wrinkled jacket. "I have a meeting at City Hall. Rosa, can you stay with him?" Rosa nodded, already settling in for a long watch. "Go. Fight them." The marble corridors of City Hall felt colder than usual as Dana's heels clicked against the polished floor. She found Caleb Knox waiting in a quiet corner of the procurement office, nervously adjusting his tie. "Ms. Whitaker," he greeted her, glancing around to ensure they weren't overheard. "Let's walk." They moved through the building's less-traveled passages, their voices low. "People in high offices want this to disappear," Caleb admitted, running a hand through his graying hair. "Bright Path's legal team is threatening lawsuits against anyone who publicly supports your grandfather. They're claiming defamation, business interference." "Let them," Dana snapped. "We have video evidence of their CEO assaulting an elderly man. They're spinning it, hard." Caleb stopped, turning to face her. "There are whispers circulating that your grandfather provoked the incident, that he has a history of confrontational behavior. They're painting him as unstable, dangerous even." "That's ridiculous. He's worked there for decades without a single complaint." "I know, but—" Caleb broke off as footsteps approached. They waited in tense silence until the sound faded. "They have money, Ms. Whitaker. Money buys influence, shapes narratives. And right now, that narrative is turning against your grandfather." Dana's phone buzzed. A message from Rosa. Images from the janitorial locker room at Bright Path. Her hands shook as she swiped through them. Racial slurs spray-painted on lockers, threatening messages scratched into metal doors, all clearly dated over several years. "Look at this," she thrust the phone at Caleb. "This is what they've been ignoring. This is the environment my grandfather worked in every day." Caleb studied the photos, his face growing pale. This could help, but... He stopped as Dana's phone buzzed again. This time it was an email, forwarded from an anonymous account. The attachment was an internal Bright Path memo dated 3 months ago, flagging Harold Whitaker as a disciplinary risk due to questioning company policies and displaying argumentative tendencies. They were building their case against him, Dana realized, fury making her voice shake. They were laying the groundwork to discredit him before any of this happened. "Be careful," Caleb warned, glancing nervously over his shoulder. "Bright Path doesn't just have money, they have people everywhere, eyes everywhere. The sun had set by the time Dana returned to Harold's house. She'd insisted on bringing him home from the hospital, setting up a makeshift bedroom in the living room so he wouldn't have to manage the stairs. Through the front window, she noticed a black sedan idling across the street, its headlights dim in the growing darkness. As she watched, the engine rumbled to life, and the car pulled away smoothly, disappearing around the corner. "They're watching," she whispered, letting the curtain fall back into place. Harold shifted in his recliner, wincing at the movement. "Let them watch," he said softly. "Let them see we won't break." Dana moved to check his bandages, her hands gentle despite the anger still burning in her chest. The house felt smaller somehow, less safe than it had just days ago. Outside, crickets chirped in the darkness, and somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. But all Dana could hear was the phantom sound of that sedan's engine, waiting in the shadows. Inside her corner office at Mitchell & Associates, Dana spread the growing pile of evidence across her desk. Late morning sunlight streamed through the windows, catching dust motes in its rays. Her coffee had gone cold hours ago, forgotten amid the mounting paperwork detailing Brightpath's history of discrimination. A soft knock at her door made her look up. Nadim Rahal stood in the doorway, his normally pristine suit slightly rumpled, dark circles under his eyes suggesting sleepless nights. His hands clutched a thick manila folder like a lifeline. "Ms. Whitaker?" His voice quavered. "May I come in?" Dana gestured to the chair across from her desk. "Please, sit down, Mr. Rahal." She studied the compliance officer's nervous demeanor as he perched on the edge of the seat. "You said you had something important to share?" Nadim's fingers drummed against the folder in his lap. "What I'm about to show you," he swallowed hard. "If anyone at Brightpath discovers I brought this to you, my career is over. Maybe worse." "I'll protect my source," Dana assured him, leaning forward. "Whatever you have, we can use it to help prevent what happened to my grandfather from happening to others." With trembling hands, Nadim placed the folder on her desk. The label read, "Clean Sweep Initiative, Phase 1 Implementation." Inside were dozens of reports, spreadsheets, and internal memos. Dana's eyes widened as she began reading. The documents outlined a comprehensive plan to replace Brightpath's janitorial staff with automated cleaning robots. But between the corporate buzzwords about modernization and efficiency, a darker purpose emerged. "Look at the demographic analysis," Nadim said softly, pointing to a color-coded chart. "They've mapped out every maintenance worker by race, age, and what they call risk factors." Dana's jaw clenched as she read. Under risk factors, they listed things like cultural resistance to authority and historical tendency toward unionization. The majority of workers marked as high risk were minorities over 50. "They're using automation as cover for systematic discrimination," she muttered, flipping through more pages. "These cost-benefit analyses aren't about efficiency at all. They're about eliminating what they view as problematic employees." Nadim nodded, his face pale. "The initiative specifically targets facilities with the highest concentration of minority staff first. They disguise it with terms like demographic risk control and cultural optimization. But the intent is clear. And my grandfather? His name appears multiple times," Nadim confirmed, reaching for a specific page. "They flagged him as a primary displacement candidate due to his age and what they called his non-compliant attitude toward authority structures." Dana's hands shook with fury as she read the clinical assessment of Harold's liability factors. They'd been planning to force him out long before the assault, documenting every minor incident that could justify his termination. "There's more," Nadim continued, his voice dropping even lower. "Look at the funding sources for the robot procurement. The numbers don't add up unless you factor in money being diverted from the city hospital contract." They're using public funds to finance their discrimination? Dana pulled out her phone to photograph key documents. The whole initiative is built on illegal... Nadim broke off as his own phone buzzed. The color drained from his face as he read the message. What is it? Someone knows I'm here. His hands trembled so badly he nearly dropped the phone. It's from Ethan's head of security. Meeting. Now. Your family's safety depends on your discretion. Dana stood quickly. We need to get you protection. I have contacts in the DA's office who can... No. Nadim cut her off, already backing toward the door. I have to go. They're watching my wife, my children. He paused in the doorway, eyes wild with fear. Use the evidence. But please, don't reveal your source until... He couldn't finish the sentence. Nadim! Wait! But he was already hurrying down the hallway. Moments later, her phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. If I vanish, you'll know why. Dana spent the rest of the afternoon making copies of everything, securing the evidence in multiple locations. As the sun began to set, she drove to the hospital to pick up Harold for his final checkout. The streets were quieter than usual as they headed home, Harold resting carefully against the passenger seat to avoid aggravating his ribs. Dana kept checking the rearview mirror, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. We're being followed, Harold noted calmly, spotting the black SUV 3 cars back. Its headlights blazed unnecessarily bright in the dusk. I see it. Dana took a sharp right turn. The SUV followed. Steady, baby girl, Harold cautioned as she accelerated. Don't let them make you panic. The SUV closed the gap, its headlights now filling their back window with harsh light. Dana's heart pounded as she took another turn, then another, trying to lose their tail. They're sending another message, Harold observed, his voice remaining level despite the tension. Letting us know they can find us whenever they want. As if to prove his point, the SUV suddenly peeled away, its tires squealing as it turned down a side street and disappeared. The abrupt absence of its headlights left them in relative darkness. Dana's hands were still shaking as she pulled into Harold's driveway. They sat in silence for a moment, both processing what had just happened. You okay? Harold asked softly. Are any of us? Dana responded, thinking of Nadim's terrified face, of the coded discrimination hidden in corporate documents, of the threats lurking in every shadow. The morning sun pierced through Brightpath's 40th floor boardroom windows, casting long shadows across the polished table. Digital displays lining the walls flashed crimson numbers, the company's stock price dropping in real time. Ethan Vale paced like a caged animal, his expensive suit wrinkled from hours of emergency meetings. 30%! He slammed his fist on the mahogany surface, making water glasses rattle. Our stock has dropped 30 goddamn % because of that. His face twisted with ugly rage as he spat a racial slur. Miriam Grant, the board chair, sat ramrod straight in her leather chair, her silver hair perfectly coiffed despite the crisis. Her voice cut through his tirade like a steel blade. That's exactly the kind of language that got us here, Ethan. Don't lecture me about... You're burning this company alive, Miriam interrupted, her tone arctic. Every time you open your mouth, every reaction, every threat, you're pouring gasoline on the flames. Other board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The youngest director, fresh from Harvard Business School, couldn't meet anyone's eyes. The CFO obsessively straightened his papers, trying to disappear. These people, Ethan snarled. These ungrateful. If you finish that sentence, Miriam warned, I'll call an emergency vote to remove you right now. She gestured at the screens. Look at those numbers. Really look. That's not just bad PR. That's shareholder value evaporating because you couldn't control yourself. Across town, in the fluorescent-lit maze of Mitchell & Associates law offices, Dana Whitaker hunched over her keyboard. Her cubicle walls were plastered with printouts, security footage stills, employee testimonies, financial records. She'd been building the civil case since dawn, fueled by coffee and righteous anger. Ms. Whitaker? Her assistant appeared at the cubicle entrance. Detective Martinez is on line 2. Says it's about Rosa Delgado's statement. Dana grabbed her phone. Detective? Yes, I'm here with her now. She turned to where Rosa sat in a chair beside her desk, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Rosa leaned forward toward the speakerphone, her voice steady despite her obvious tension. Like I told you before, the man who attacked Harold, the shorter one, his security badge was visible when he swung. Blue stripe on white plastic. Bright Path logo clear as day. Could you identify him in a lineup? The detective asked. No. Rosa's fingers twisted together. He wore a mask. But I know that badge. I've worked there 15 years. The blue stripe means Executive Protection Detail. They guard the C-suite offices. Dana typed rapidly, documenting every detail. That connects the assault directly to Bright Path's security team, she said. We need warrant to access their badge records for that night. Working on it, Martinez replied. But their legal team is fighting us on every. A commotion in the office hallway cut him off. Dana looked up to see several of her colleagues clustered around a computer screen, faces grave. I'll call you back, she told Martinez, hurrying over. What's happening? Her colleague wordlessly turned his monitor. A breaking news site displayed a leaked medical document, what appeared to be a psychiatric evaluation of Harold Whitaker. Dana's blood ran cold as she scanned the text. History of paranoid delusions. Workplace persecution complex. Violent outbursts during Vietnam service. The medical letterhead looked official. Every word was carefully crafted character assassination. Within hours, news channels picked up the story. Talking heads debated Harold's mental state. Social media posts questioned if he had snapped and attacked Ethan first. The carefully manufactured sympathy shift made Dana physically ill. She drove to Harold's house as soon as she saw the reports, finding him sitting in his small living room. The TV was on, muted, showing yet another panel discussion about his troubled history. Daddy? Dana hadn't called him that since she was little. We need to... Her voice trailed off as she saw his shoulders shaking. Harold Whitaker, who had survived war, poverty, and decades of discrimination without breaking, was crying silently in his armchair. They made it all up, he whispered. Every word. But people will believe it because it's what they want to believe about men like me. Dana knelt beside him, taking the printed psychiatric report from his trembling hands. With deliberate movements, she tore it cleanly in half, then in quarters. Let them spin their lies, she said, her voice hard with determination. We have truth. We have evidence. We have witnesses. Harold wiped his eyes. I'm tired, baby girl. So tired of fighting. I know, Dana gripped his hand tightly. They want us scared. They want us to give up. She met his gaze, seeing decades of pain but also unbreakable dignity. Let's make them scared instead. Harold looked at their clasped hands, his weathered and calloused from years of labor, hers smooth but strong from carrying briefcases instead of mops. A hint of his old strength crept back into his posture. Your grandmother used to say, "Truth rises like cream," he murmured. No matter how much dirt they stir up, it always rises. Dana squeezed his hand, thinking of Nadim's documents, of Rosa's testimony, of the security footage yet to be uncovered. The pieces were there. They just had to be brave enough to assemble them. The afternoon sun beat down on the Chevron station's cracked pavement. Heat waves rippled off the empty pumps, creating mirages that matched Nadim Rahal's jittery nerves. He sat in his silver Accord, engine idling for a quick escape, watching every vehicle that passed with growing anxiety. His phone buzzed. A text from Dana. 2 minutes away. Nadim's hands trembled as he adjusted his rearview mirror for the 100th time. The parking lot remained empty, except for a weathered pickup truck whose driver was inside paying for gas. Still, his heart jumped at every passing car, every distant siren. When Dana's blue Honda pulled in beside him, Nadim almost cried with relief. She parked close, driver's side to driver's side, so they could talk through their windows. "Did anyone follow you?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. Dana shook her head. "I took 3 different routes, checked my mirrors the whole way. We're clear." Nadim's fingers clenched around a small object in his pocket. The flash drive felt impossibly heavy for something so tiny. 2 years of secret recordings, emails, and financial records, evidence that could destroy careers, and maybe get him killed. "I can't sleep anymore," he confessed, dark circles evident under his eyes. "Every noise, every shadow. I keep thinking they know." "We can protect you," Dana assured him. "My firm has connections with—" "No." Nadim pulled out the flash drive. Its metal casing caught the sunlight. "I'm leaving town tonight, going somewhere they can't find me." He pressed the drive into her hand. "This has everything. The bribes to city officials, the racial profiling algorithms in HR, the safety violations they covered up. Everything." Dana stared at the small device. "Nadim, come with me now. We can— My family's already gone. Sent them ahead this morning." His smile was bitter. "Told my kids we're taking a surprise vacation. Better they think that than know their father might." He stopped himself. "Just make it count, okay?" "I will," Dana promised. "But please, let me help. Someone's coming." Nadim's eyes widened at an approaching black SUV. "Go! Now!" Dana pulled away, watching in her mirror as Nadim's Accord sped off in the opposite direction. The SUV drove past without stopping, but the fear in Nadim's eyes haunted her all the way back to the office. Hours later, her phone rang. Detective Martinez's voice was grim. "A silver Honda Accord was just found in the Riverside Canal," he said without preamble. "License plate matches your whistleblower." Dana's stomach lurched. "Nadim! Is he—" "No body recovered yet. Divers are searching." Driver's side door was open, signs of impact damage on the guardrail. Martinez paused. "Ms. Whitaker." The brake lines were cut. She sank into her chair, the flash drive suddenly feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds. "It wasn't an accident." "No," Martinez agreed. "It wasn't." Dana worked through the night, analyzing the drive's contents. Each file revealed new layers of corruption. The morning light was just breaking when she found it. A series of emails between Ethan Vale and city procurement officials, dated exactly 1 week before BrightPath won their 300 Nalis contract. Wire transfers, offshore accounts, golf club memberships gifted to family members. The paper trail was meticulous, preserved by Nadim's careful documentation. She thought of him checking these records late at night, alone in his office, knowing what would happen if he was caught. Her eyes burned with exhaustion and unshed tears as she compiled the evidence. Around 8 a.m., Harold arrived, moving slowly with his cane. He'd insisted on coming to the office despite her protests that he should rest. "You look tired, baby girl," he said, settling into the chair across from her desk. "Nadim's dead." The words came out raw. "They killed him for this." She gestured at her screen, showing the evidence of BrightPath's corruption. Harold was quiet for a long moment, studying the amounts listed in the bribes. Finally, he spoke softly. "He died for truth. He had kids," Dana whispered. "A family. And he chose to stand up anyway." Harold reached across the desk, covering her hand with his. "Because he knew some things matter more than fear." Dana looked at their joined hands, then at the damning evidence filling her screen. "He trusted me to make this count." "Then let's make it count," Harold said firmly. His voice carried the weight of decades fighting similar battles, of countless small dignities denied, of all the times he'd been forced to swallow his pride and keep mopping floors. For Nadim. For every person they thought they could silence. Dana straightened in her chair, drawing strength from her grandfather's quiet determination. She thought of Nadim's trembling hands passing her the flash drive, of his last gift to justice. On her screen, the evidence waited, a digital testament to one man's courage, and the truth he died protecting. She opened her email and began composing a message to Detective Martinez, copying her most trusted reporters. Harold watched in approval as her fingers flew across the keyboard, turning Nadim's sacrifice into armor for their fight. The midday sun glared off Brightpath's glass tower, casting harsh reflections onto the crowd below. Hundreds of protesters packed the plaza, their signs bobbing like angry waves. Justice for Harold. Black Lives Matter. Brightpath. Bigot Path. The chants echoed between buildings, growing louder with each repetition. No justice. No peace. Hands off Harold. Fire Ethan Vale. Inside the tower's third floor, Rosa watched through the windows, her heart swelling at the sight of so many people standing up for Harold. Around her, employees clustered near the glass, some recording with phones, others whispering nervously. "Look at all of them," whispered Jenny from accounting, her eyes wide. "I've never seen anything like this." Rosa nodded, noticing how the protest stretched around the block. Students, church groups, union workers, and ordinary citizens had joined forces. Some carried mops in solidarity. Others wore blue jumpsuits like Harold's. The peaceful crowd's energy felt electric, hopeful. 20 floors above, Ethan Vale stood in his corner office, jaw clenched, as he watched the demonstration. His fixer lounged in a leather chair, speaking quietly into a phone. "They're in position," the fixer reported, hanging up. "Just say when." Ethan's lips curved into a cold smile. "Do it." Down in the crowd, the change happened so fast many didn't notice at first. Men in hoodies appeared at the edges, faces masked. They moved through the protesters like sharks through water. The first rock shattered a ground-floor window, the crash drawing gasps and shouts. "No! Stop!" A protest organizer tried to grab one of the masked men. "We're peaceful." But more rocks flew. More windows broke. The agitators pushed and shoved, creating pockets of chaos that news cameras eagerly focused on. Police sirens wailed in the distance. Rosa pressed closer to the glass, watching in horror as the peaceful demonstration descended into mayhem. "This isn't right," she muttered. "This isn't our people." Security guards poured out of the building's lobby, wearing riot gear and carrying batons. They formed a line, advancing on the crowd. Protesters began to retreat, hands raised. Then it happened. A black SUV with Brightpath's logo gunned its engine, tires squealing as it accelerated toward the crowd. People screamed and scattered. But one young woman, holding a "Justice for Harold" sign, couldn't move fast enough. The impact threw her 10 feet. Her body hit the pavement as phones recorded from every angle. The SUV never slowed down. "Oh, God!" Jenny covered her mouth, tears streaming. Other employees backed away from the windows, faces pale. Rosa couldn't look away. She'd seen the driver's face through the windshield, one of Ethan's personal security team. This was planned. This was deliberate. Paramedics arrived within minutes. News helicopters circled overhead like vultures. Every channel switched to live coverage, but they focused on the broken windows, the scattered rocks, the violent uprising that had turned tragic. Hours later, as the sun set behind the city skyline, Rosa finally left work. Her hands shook as she unlocked her car, remembering the young woman's body flying through the air. The image wouldn't leave her mind. The drive home felt longer than usual. Every shadow made her jump. Every car behind her seemed threatening. When she pulled into her driveway, the motion sensor light didn't come on. "Perfect," she muttered, fumbling with her keys in the darkness. "Just what I need." She reached her front door and froze. Something dark was smeared across the white paint. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears as she clicked on her phone's flashlight. Blood. Fresh and red, dripping down her door in ugly streaks. And pinned in the center, a note written in the same crimson fluid. "You're next." Rosa stumbled backward, phone nearly slipping from her trembling fingers. She managed to take a photo before calling Dana, her voice cracking. "They were at my house," she whispered. They left blood." "Don't touch anything," Dana ordered. "I'm calling Detective Martinez. Go to your neighbor's house right now. Don't stay there alone." Rosa glanced at the dark windows of her home, wondering if someone was already inside, waiting. The blood gleamed wetly in her phone's light. Her sanctuary had become a threat, marked by the same violence that had taken Nadim, that had beaten Harold, that had run down an innocent protester. She backed away from her door, hurrying next door to Mrs. Chen's house. The elderly woman took one look at Rosa's face and pulled her inside, locking the door behind them. Through Mrs. Chen's window, Rosa watched police cars arrive, their red and blue lights painting the neighborhood in alternating colors. Officers photographed the door, took samples, dusted for prints. But she knew they wouldn't find anything. Ethan's people were too careful, too professional. Detective Martinez interviewed her in Mrs. Chen's kitchen, his face grim as she described the day's events. "First Nadim, now this," he said, shaking his head. "They're escalating." "They want us scared," Rosa replied, hands wrapped around a cooling cup of tea. "They want us to back down." Martinez studied her. "Will you?" Rosa thought of Harold's dignity, of Nadim's sacrifice, of the young woman lying broken on the pavement. The blood on her door was meant to terrify her into silence. Instead, it made her angry. "No," she said firmly. "I won't." The morning after Rosa's door was vandalized, Dana pulled into her law firm's parking garage. Her heels clicked against concrete as she walked toward her silver Audi, mind racing with strategy for the day's depositions. The sound echoed off concrete pillars in the nearly empty structure. Something felt wrong. The air smelled different. She was still 20 feet from her car when she noticed it, a small puddle beneath the vehicle. Her steps slowed. The chemical smell grew stronger. Then she saw the wire. "Oh, God!" Dana backpedaled, turning to run. She'd made it 3 steps when the explosion hit. The blast knocked her forward onto the pavement. Heat washed over her back as her car erupted into a fireball. Glass and metal rained down, pinging off parked vehicles. Black smoke billowed through the garage, setting off fire alarms that wailed through the building. Dana pushed herself up, ears ringing. Her palms were scraped raw from the fall. Smoke stung her eyes and throat as she stumbled toward the exit, coughing. Other cars' alarms blared in cacophony. Through the haze, she saw people running down from upper levels, shouting about calling 911. But Dana couldn't focus on their words. All she could feel was rage, pure, white-hot fury that made her hands shake. They'd tried to kill her, just like they'd killed Nadim, just like they'd threatened Rosa, just like they'd beaten Harold. By the time firefighters arrived, Dana was sitting on a concrete barrier outside, refusing medical attention despite the soot on her face and clothes. Detective Martinez knelt beside her, notepad ready. "Same signature as the other attacks," he said quietly. "Professional job. They wanted to send a message." "Message received," Dana growled. "And here's my response. I'm going to bury them." Her phone buzzed. A text from Caleb Knox. "Check your email, now." With trembling fingers, Dana opened her inbox. Caleb had sent dozens of documents, procurement records, inspection reports, internal memos, all showing how BrightPath had systematically falsified safety data to win city contracts. "Jesus," she whispered, scrolling through. Equipment maintenance logs were forged. Required inspections never happened. 3 hospital patients had died when BrightPath's faulty monitoring systems failed. She forwarded everything to her media contacts, adding a simple message. "They tried to kill me this morning. Here's why." Within hours, the story exploded. News channels cut from footage of her burning car to damning evidence of BrightPath's negligence. The company's stock price plummeted. Justice for Harold trended again, alongside York's BrightPath kills. That afternoon, Harold agreed to an interview with Channel 7's most respected anchor. They set up in his living room, Harold in his favorite armchair, looking dignified despite his lingering bruises. "Mr. Whitaker," the anchor began, "how do you respond to BrightPath's claims that you provoked the incident?" Harold's voice was steady. "I've spent 50 years cleaning floors, ma'am. 50 years being invisible to men like Ethan Vale. Until I wasn't invisible enough." He paused, dabbing sweat from his forehead. "They want to paint me as angry, violent. But I'm just tired. Tired of—" His words slurred. His hand dropped. Then Harold slumped forward in his chair. "Grandpa!" Dana rushed to him from where she'd been watching off camera. The anchor called for help as the camera crew scrambled. Hours later, Harold lay in a hospital bed, monitors beeping steadily. The doctor said it was exhaustion combined with stress, but he'd be okay with rest. Dana held his weathered hand, noting how fragile it felt. "I'm sorry," Harold whispered. "Should have been stronger." "Don't you dare apologize." Dana's voice cracked. "You're the strongest person I know." Harold's grip tightened slightly. "They think they can bury this. Like they bury everything." His eyes, though tired, burned with determination. "Don't let them, baby girl. Make them choke on it." Across town, in BrightPath's basement storage room, Ethan's fixer fed documents into an industrial shredder. The machine growled as it devoured page after page labeled "Camera Loop Authorization," evidence of the CEO ordering security footage to be altered, proving premeditation in Harold's assault. The fixer's phone buzzed, Ethan demanding confirmation that everything was destroyed. But as he reached for another stack of papers, he didn't notice the janitor watching through a crack in the door, recording every moment. The shredder whirred endlessly, turning damning evidence into confetti. Up in his penthouse office, Ethan paced, waiting for confirmation. The city was turning against him. His own board was asking uncomfortable questions. And somewhere out there, that old janitor and his crusading granddaughter were still fighting. He grabbed his phone, barking at his fixer. "Is it done?" "Almost. Just finishing the last batch. Burn the shreds. I want nothing left." But it was too late. The truth was already spreading, flowing through the city like smoke, impossible to contain. Just like the smoke that still lingered in the parking garage where they'd tried to silence Dinah. Just like the smoke that rose from Nadim's submerged car. Just like the acrid smell of burning rubber when they'd run down that protester. The fire they'd started was growing beyond their control. And soon, it would consume them all. Harold sat in his worn armchair, morning sunlight streaming through the window. His broken glasses lay on the side table, the cracked lens catching the light. The attack in the parking lot had left them twisted, but he couldn't bring himself to throw them away. Like everything else in his life, they held memories, both good and painful. Dana paced the small living room, still fuming about her destroyed car. Her suit was wrinkled from a sleepless night, spent reviewing Caleb's leaked documents. "There has to be more," she muttered. "Something we missed." Harold stared at his glasses, watching the light dance through the spider-webbed cracks. Something tugged at his memory. A detail from his years of maintenance work. Something about cameras and backup systems. His eyes widened. "The janitor's closet camera?" he said suddenly. Dana stopped pacing. "What?" "The security camera outside the janitor's closet. It shares a backup feed with the maintenance facility across town." Harold leaned forward, excitement breaking through his exhaustion. BrightPath installed redundant systems years ago after a fire wiped out their main servers. Every camera has an off-site backup. Dana rushed to kneel beside his chair. "Are you sure? The footage from that night could still exist? If they didn't know about the backup?" "Yes." Harold's hands trembled slightly. "The system was old, forgotten. Only us maintenance workers knew about it." Dana pulled out her phone, fingers flying over the keys as she texted Caleb. Within minutes, he called back. "The old maintenance facility on Industrial Drive," Caleb confirmed. "It's been closed since the automation upgrade, but the servers should still be there. I can get you in. I have master access codes from my procurement work." "When?" Dana demanded. "Tonight. Security's minimal since the closure, but we have to hurry. They're scheduled to clear out the building next week." As darkness fell, Dana parked her rental car behind the abandoned maintenance facility. The concrete building loomed silent and dark, its windows dusty with disuse. Caleb waited by a side door, nervously checking his phone. "Security patrol passes every hour," he whispered. "We have 40 minutes until the next round." Dana nodded, pulling on black gloves. "Show me." Caleb punched in a code, and the door clicked open. They slipped inside, flashlight beams cutting through years of dust. Their footsteps echoed in the empty corridors as Caleb led them to the server room. The space was cramped, filled with humming equipment. Despite the building's closure, the backup systems still ran, too critical to simply shut down. Caleb moved to a terminal, fingers dancing across the keyboard. "Accessing archival footage," he murmured. "Date of the incident." The screen flickered, showing multiple camera feeds. Dana leaned close, watching as Caleb navigated through folders of stored video. "There!" She pointed to a file marked with the date of the assault. The footage was grainy but clear enough. The camera's view showed the hallway outside the janitor's closet, partially capturing the lobby where the assault occurred. But more importantly, it showed what happened before. Ethan appeared on screen, checking his watch. A security guard approached, and their conversation was captured by the camera's microphone. "Loop the lobby footage for the next hour," Ethan ordered. "I'm going to teach that old man some respect. Sir, I don't think... Just do it. And make sure the main system records show him attacking me first." Dana's hands clenched into fists as they watched. The footage continued, showing Ethan deliberately walking toward Harold's cleaning area. The slap. The blood. Everything captured from this forgotten angle. "Download it," Dana commanded. "Multiple copies." Caleb worked quickly, transferring the files to secure drives. Outside, a light swept past the windows, the security patrol arriving early. "We need to move," Caleb hissed. They hurried through dark corridors, hearts pounding. The guard's footsteps echoed somewhere nearby. Dana clutched the precious drives to her chest as they slipped out the side door, quietly pulling it shut. They made it to Dana's car, just as flashlight beams swung around the corner. Crouching low, they waited until the guard passed before starting the engine and driving away. Miles later, in the safety of Dana's office, they reviewed the footage again. Every damning second was preserved. Proof of premeditation, of Ethan ordering evidence destroyed, of the entire cover-up. "This changes everything," Caleb said quietly. "There's no spinning this away." Dana connected one of the drives to her computer. Her hands were steady now, anger replaced by cold determination. She began uploading copies to secure servers, to trusted journalists, to government investigators. "What about Harold?" Caleb asked. "Should we show him first?" Dana shook her head. "No time. If we wait, they might find a way to stop us." She hit the final upload button. "Let's end this." Across the city, phones began buzzing with notifications. News alerts flashed. Social media exploded with the new footage. The video spread like wildfire, destroying every lie Brightpath had crafted. In his hospital bed, Harold watched on his tablet as truth finally emerged. His weathered face showed no triumph, no celebration, only quiet vindication as justice began its work. The sun was rising again, painting the city in gold. But this dawn was different. This dawn carried truth on its rays, illuminating every shadow where corruption had hidden. And in its light, no amount of money or power could hide what had really happened on that marble floor. Morning light filtered through Brightpath's towering windows, casting long shadows across the transformed office floor. Where cubicles had once created a maze of workspace, now stood rows of elegant chairs facing a small stage draped in corporate blue. The marble floor gleamed beneath, freshly polished to erase any trace of what had happened there weeks ago. Ethan Vale stood at the podium, adjusting his gold cufflinks as he practiced his speech. His reflection in the glass showed a man desperately clinging to control, his face lined with tension despite expert makeup. And as we move forward, Brightpath remains committed to workplace dignity and respect, he rehearsed, voice echoing in the empty space. "Recent events have been misconstrued by those seeking to damage our reputation." Behind him, event staff arranged flower arrangements and adjusted lighting. Security personnel in dark suits stationed themselves at strategic points, their earpieces glinting. The fixer stood in a corner, speaking quietly into his phone. Across town, Dana's office buzzed with controlled chaos. Journalists huddled around her conference table, reviewing copies of the backup footage on tablets. Their faces showed a mix of shock and eagerness as they watched Ethan's premeditated actions unfold. "The stream is ready," her tech expert confirmed, showing her the setup. "One click, and it broadcasts to every screen in that room, plus major news networks." Dana nodded, checking her phone again. No response from Rosa. The janitorial supervisor always answered texts, especially since the threats began. Something felt wrong. "Has anyone heard from Rosa today?" she asked the room. Heads shook. Dana dialed Rosa's number, tension building in her shoulders. The phone rang once, twice, then connected. But instead of Rosa's warm voice, Dana heard muffled sounds, thumping, a choked cry. "Rosa?" Dana's voice sharpened with alarm. "Rosa, are you there?" More sounds, fabric against a microphone. What might have been tape being ripped. Then clear, terrified screaming before the line went dead. Dana's hands shook as she lowered the phone. The room had gone silent, everyone staring at her. She could still hear Rosa's scream echoing in her head. "Track her phone," she ordered the tech expert. "Now." As he worked, Dana paced, her heels clicking against the floor. The timing wasn't coincidental. Hours before the gala, before their evidence would expose everything, they had taken Rosa. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. A photo appeared. Rosa bound to a chair in what looked like a storage room, fear clear in her eyes despite the poor lighting. A message followed. "Back off, or she dies." Dana's jaw clenched. She thought of Harold in his hospital bed, of Nadim's car in the river, of every person Brightpath had hurt or silenced. Not this time. Not Rosa. "Keep working on the location," she told her team. "And get me everything you can on Brightpath's properties, especially storage facilities or unused spaces." She brought up the building plans they'd acquired during the investigation. The main office had sub-basements, maintenance areas, old storage rooms from before the renovations. places where screams wouldn't carry. The tech expert looked up. Her phone's last signal came from near Brightpath Tower. "It's off now, but—" "They're keeping her close," Dana finished, "where they can control the situation during the gala." She studied the blueprints more carefully. The sub-basement level showed a series of old maintenance rooms, now supposedly unused, perfect for hiding someone. "Change of plans," she announced. "I'm going to the gala early. Have the stream ready, but don't activate until I give the signal." "What about Rosa?" someone asked. Dana grabbed her briefcase, checking that the backup drives were secure inside. "I'm getting her out first. Then we're going to make Ethan Vale choke on every lie he's ever told." She chose her outfit carefully. A conservative black suit that would let her blend in with other executives, heels she could run in if needed. Under her jacket, she clipped a small recorder. Back at Brightpath, the gala preparations continued. Staff hung banners proclaiming, "Building Tomorrow Together," while caterers set up elegant refreshment tables. The fixer directed security personnel with hand signals, positioning them near every exit. Ethan stood at the window of his corner office, watching the city below. He'd changed into a fresh suit, dark blue with subtle pinstripes. Every detail of his appearance was calculated to project strength and control. "The guest list is confirmed," his assistant reported. "Press has been screened. Security is ready." Ethan nodded, adjusting his tie. "And our problem?" "Contained," the fixer answered from the doorway. "She won't interfere." "Good." Ethan turned from the window, practiced smile in place. "Let's give them a show they won't forget." In the sub-basement, Rosa twisted against her bonds, tape across her mouth muffling her protests. A single guard watched her, looking bored. Above, she could hear the sounds of chairs being arranged, of people preparing for the gala where Ethan would lie again. She thought of Harold, of his dignity even as blood dripped from his nose. She thought of all the years she'd worked here, watching corruption hide behind polish and pretense. Her eyes burned with tears of rage, but she kept struggling. Someone would come. Justice would find its way into even these dark corners. The guard checked his phone, muttering about missing the party upstairs. Rosa kept working at the ropes, ignoring the pain as they cut into her wrists. She just needed time. And upstairs, she knew, Dana was coming. The afternoon sun streamed through Brightpath's glass walls, casting long shadows across the transformed office space. Well-dressed shareholders and reporters filled the rows of chairs where cubicles had once stood. The air hummed with anticipation and the soft murmur of conversation. Security personnel lined the walls, their dark suits and earpieces making them look like identical sentries. Near the refreshment table, marketing staff distributed glossy folders showcasing Brightpath's commitment to workplace dignity. Dana slipped through the crowd, her black suit helping her blend with the other executives. Her heart raced, knowing Rosa was somewhere below in the building's dark sublevels. But timing was crucial. She had to let Ethan begin his performance before bringing down the curtain. The lights dimmed slightly, drawing attention to the small stage. Miriam Grant, the board chair, approached the podium first. Her silver hair gleamed as she introduced Ethan Vale, describing him as a leader committed to positive change. Ethan strode onto the stage, his blue pinstriped suit immaculate. He gripped the podium with manicured hands, flashing his practiced smile at the crowd. The same hands that had struck Harold weeks ago, now gesturing smoothly as he began to speak. "Distinguished shareholders, members of the press," he began, voice steady and controlled. "Recent weeks have brought challenges to Brightpath. Misunderstandings have been weaponized by those seeking to damage our reputation." In the back of the room, Dana's tech expert confirmed through her earpiece that the stream was ready. She watched Ethan's performance, noting how his confident facade masked the desperation in his eyes. But Brightpath remains committed to excellence. Ethan continued, warming to his theme. To dignity in the workplace. To treating every employee with the respect they deserve. A soft click echoed through the sound system. The massive screens behind Ethan, meant to display corporate logos, suddenly flickered to life. Crystal-clear footage filled the displays, showing this very room weeks ago when it still held cubicles. The audience gasped as they watched Ethan storm across the freshly mopped floor. Harold's blue jumpsuit was vivid in the footage, his dignified posture a stark contrast to Ethan's rage. The sound of the slap cracked through the speakers, followed by the thud of Harold's glasses hitting marble. Ethan spun around, his rehearsed smile shattering as he saw himself exposed on the screens. The footage continued, showing him ordering the camera loop, revealing the calculated nature of his violence. "Turn it off!" he shouted, but the tech crew couldn't override Dana's stream. The footage played again, an endless loop of truth, destroying his carefully constructed lies. Reporters' cameras flashed. Shareholders whispered in shock. The security team looked uncertain, glancing between Ethan and their earpieces for instructions. Dana stepped forward, her voice carrying across the stunned crowd. "This is the real Bright Path culture, ladies and gentlemen. Violence, racism, and corruption, all hidden behind marble and glass." Ethan lunged from the stage, his face contorted with fury. He reached Dana in 3 long strides, his fist connecting with her jaw before anyone could react. She stumbled but didn't fall, tasting blood. The crowd scattered, creating space around the confrontation. Security finally moved forward, but Ethan was already charging toward the exit near the janitor's closet. He didn't see Harold until it was too late. The elderly janitor stood in his path, leaning on a mop handle but straight-backed and resolute. His recent hospital stay had left him thinner, but his eyes blazed with quiet strength. "Moving kinda fast there, Mr. Vale," Harold said softly. "Floor might be slippery." Ethan's hand disappeared into his jacket, emerging with a switchblade. The blade snapped open with a click that echoed in the sudden silence. "Get out of my way, old man," he snarled. Harold's response was to swing the mop handle in a smooth arc, decades of military training flowing through his aged muscles. The aluminum shaft knocked the knife from Ethan's grip, sending it skittering across the floor. Ethan howled in rage and charged. Harold pivoted, using the mop handle like a staff to deflect the attack. The CEO's momentum carried him past, straight into a desk divider. The impact shook the partition, but didn't stop him. He spun back, murder in his eyes, but his expensive leather shoes found a puddle of spilled cleaning fluid. His feet went out from under him, arms windmilling as he tried to catch himself. The impact when he hit the marble floor echoed through the office. The crack of bone breaking was followed by Ethan's scream of pain. He clutched his twisted arm, curled on the same floor where he'd assaulted Harold weeks ago. Police burst through the stairwell doors, weapons drawn. Behind them came Caleb Knox, supporting a limping but very much alive Rosa. Her wrists showed rope marks, but her eyes shone with triumph as she watched Ethan writhing on the floor. "They had her in the old storage room," Caleb explained to Dana. "Once we found the security badge logs, it was just a matter of timing." Cameras flashed as officers cuffed Ethan, careful of his broken arm. The CEO's tears and mucus stained the marble floor he'd once ruled over. Around them, the cubicles that had witnessed his original crime now saw his humiliation. The backup footage continued playing on the screens above, an endless loop of truth that could never be hidden again. Shareholders pressed forward, demanding answers. Reporters shouted questions. But in the center of the chaos, Harold simply leaned on his mop handle, watching justice finally arrive. The next morning's sunrise painted Bright Path's glass tower in shades of orange and gold. FBI agents in dark windbreakers moved methodically through the maze of cubicles, their presence turning the once bustling office into a crime scene. The sound of packing tape being pulled and boxes being sealed echoed through the floor. Employees stood in clusters near the break room, watching in stunned silence as decades of corporate secrets were carried away in cardboard boxes. Computer hard drives, financial records, and personnel files. Each piece of evidence told its own story of corruption. "Clear this section," an agent called out, directing her team toward the executive offices. Through the glass walls, workers could see investigators methodically photographing Ethan's corner office before touching anything. The marble floor still bore a faint stain where Harold's blood had fallen. Sarah from accounting clutched her coffee mug, whispering to her colleague, "I can't believe we worked here all this time, never knowing." "Oh, we knew," Tom from IT replied quietly. "We just didn't want to see it." In the center of the floor, Caleb Knox stood with federal investigators, pointing out which servers contained the most damaging evidence. His voice carried clearly in the hushed space as he explained BrightPath's elaborate system of fake accounts and hidden payments. "The bribes were coded as consulting fees," he explained, pulling up spreadsheets on his laptop. Each payment corresponded to a major contract award. The hospital deal was just the tip of the iceberg. The investigators nodded, taking detailed notes. One agent whispered to another, "This guy's testimony is going to bury them." Near the reception desk, Rosa watched the proceedings with quiet satisfaction. Her wrists still showed bruises from her captivity, but her eyes were clear and determined as she directed agents to additional storage areas they might have missed. "Check the maintenance logs in the basement," she advised. Harold kept records of everything, including which executives came down there to destroy documents. The elevator dinged, and Miriam Grant emerged, flanked by her lawyers. The board chair's usual imperial bearing was gone, replaced by the haunted look of someone watching their legacy crumble. She made her way to a hastily assembled podium near the center of the office floor, where reporters had already gathered. Camera lights flicked on as Miriam adjusted the microphone. Behind her, agents continued their work, providing a backdrop that made her prepared statement feel even more surreal. "On behalf of BrightPath's board of directors," she began, her voice slightly trembling, "I want to express our profound regret for the culture of discrimination and violence that was allowed to flourish under our oversight." More employees drifted out of their cubicles to watch, forming a silent audience to their company's public confession. "We failed our workers," Miriam continued. "We failed our community. And we failed basic human decency when we chose to protect profits instead of people." She paused, removing her designer glasses to wipe her eyes. Mr. Whitaker's assault was not an isolated incident, but rather a symptom of systemic rot that went unchallenged for too long. Through the windows, more FBI vehicles arrived in the parking lot below. The morning sun caught their federal seals, making them gleam against the black paint. "Effective immediately, I am announcing my resignation," Miriam stated, "and I will be cooperating fully with all investigations into BrightPath's illegal activities." Questions erupted from the press corps, but Miriam raised a hand for silence. "One final note. To Harold Whitaker and every other employee we failed to protect. Your dignity was never worth less than our stock price. We were wrong. I was wrong. And I am deeply sorry." As she stepped away from the podium, an agent approached with a warrant for additional files. Miriam nodded wearily and handed over her office keys. Across town at City Hall, a different scene was unfolding. Harold stood on the broad stone steps, his granddaughter Dana beside him. His face still showed fading bruises, but he stood straight and dignified in a crisp blue suit. Reporters clustered around him, microphones extended. The morning light caught his silver hair as he considered their questions. "Mr. Whitaker, how do you feel about BrightPath's collapse?" Harold adjusted his new glasses, taking his time before responding. "You know, When you mop a floor, you see things others miss. Dirt in the corners, cracks in the shine. For years, I watched them build their empire on other people's pain. More cameras clicked as he continued. They thought we were invisible. The cleaners, the security guards, the maintenance staff. But we saw everything. Every dirty deal. Every cruel word. Every time they thought their money made them better than the rest of us. Did you ever expect this level of corruption to be exposed? Another reporter called out. Truth is like water, Harold replied, a slight smile touching his lips. It finds every crack, seeps into every dark place. I just had to keep the floor clean enough so people could see what was really underneath all that marble and glass. The morning traffic hummed behind him as he gripped the podium, his weathered hands steady. They spent millions making everything shine. But they forgot. Somebody had to mop up their mess every night. Somebody had to see what they really were. Dana squeezed his arm supportively as the questions continued. The old janitor's quiet dignity seemed to fill the space between City Hall's towering columns, his voice carrying the weight of every worker who'd ever been treated as less than human. The marble halls of the federal courthouse buzzed with anticipation. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished floor as journalists and spectators filed into the crowded courtroom. The wooden benches creaked under the weight of the packed audience, all eyes fixed on the two men at the center of the drama. Ethan Vale sat at the defense table, his expensive suit now hanging loose on his frame after months in custody. His usual arrogance had dimmed to a sickly pallor, though his jaw still clenched with barely contained rage. His right arm, still healing from the gala incident, rested in a black sling against his chest. Across the aisle, Harold Whitaker sat straight-backed in his best brown jacket, the one he'd worn to his granddaughter's law school graduation. His hands rested calmly in his lap, weathered fingers intertwined. The bruises had faded, but the dignity that had carried him through decades of invisible labor remained undiminished. Dana sat beside her grandfather, legal papers arranged precisely before her. She'd barely slept in weeks, preparing for this moment. The evidence boxes stacked behind her told the story of BrightPath's collapse, each document, email, and video clip another nail in Ethan's coffin. The bailiff's voice cut through the murmur. All rise! Judge Martinez entered, his black robes sweeping as he took his place at the bench. Be seated, he commanded, adjusting his reading glasses as he reviewed the file before him. The prosecutor rose first, her voice clear and measured. Your Honor, the evidence will show that Mr. Vale not only committed assault, but orchestrated a far-reaching campaign of corruption, intimidation, and racial discrimination. She gestured to the first exhibit, the original viral video of the slap, now enhanced and stabilized. The courtroom watched in silence as the familiar scene played out. Harold mopping, Ethan's rage, the shocking crack of palm against flesh. Several jurors flinched at the sound. But this was just the beginning, the prosecutor continued, clicking to the next piece of evidence. When Mr. Vale realized he'd been caught, he didn't show remorse. Instead, he ordered his security team to doctor surveillance footage. The split-screen comparison appeared. The real video versus BrightPath's edited version showing Harold as the aggressor. Whispers rippled through the gallery. Text messages between Mr. Vale and his head of security confirmed the deliberate manipulation. She read from a projected screen. Make it look like the old man started it. I don't care how. Ethan's lawyer objected to various pieces of evidence, but Judge Martinez overruled him repeatedly. The prosecution's case was meticulous, building hour by hour like a rising tide. Financial records detailed the bribes, millions flowing through shell companies to secure contracts. Internal emails revealed Ethan's racist rants about his maintenance staff. These people should be grateful we let them clean our floors. The Project Clean Sweep documents drew gasps. Detailed plans to systematically replace minority workers with automated systems, complete with statistics on demographic efficiency improvements. By afternoon, the sun had shifted, casting harsh light directly on Ethan's face as Rosa took the stand. She described the years of harassment, the threats after she testified, her terrifying hours of captivity before the final gala. "He told his men to make an example of me," she stated firmly, pointing at Ethan. "Said no one would believe a Mexican cleaning lady anyway." Ethan's composure finally cracked. He surged to his feet, face contorted with rage. "You ungrateful!" he snarled, spitting out a vicious racial slur that echoed through the stunned courtroom. "Order!" Judge Martinez's gavel crashed down as federal marshals moved to restrain Ethan. "One more outburst, and you'll be removed, Mr. Vale." Harold watched calmly as his former boss was forced back into his seat, the mask of corporate respectability completely shattered. Dana squeezed her grandfather's hand, and he gave her a small, knowing smile. The prosecution's final evidence was devastating. The recovered backup video showing Ethan explicitly ordering the camera footage to be looped before the assault. His voice rang clear. "Make sure nothing records for the next hour. I'm going to teach that old man some respect." Judge Martinez called a brief recess before sentencing. The courtroom hummed with tension as the minutes ticked by. Journalists scribbled furiously in notebooks, while sketch artists captured Ethan's deteriorating composure. When the judge returned, his face was stern. "Mr. Vale, stand for sentencing." Ethan rose unsteadily, his lawyer's hand on his elbow. The room fell silent. "In 30 years on the bench, I have rarely seen such a calculated pattern of cruelty and corruption," Judge Martinez began. "You assaulted an elderly man for doing his job, then unleashed a campaign of violence and intimidation to cover your crimes. You corrupted public contracts, endangered lives, and showed utter contempt for human dignity." The judge paused, removing his glasses. "But perhaps most damning is your complete lack of remorse. Even today, you've demonstrated that you still view certain people as beneath you, beneath your respect, beneath your humanity." Ethan stared straight ahead, jaw working silently as Judge Martinez continued. "This court sentences you to 10 years in federal prison," the judge declared, his gavel punctuating each word. "You will also pay $5 million in restitution to your victims." The gallery erupted in murmurs. Cameras clicked rapidly as federal marshals approached with handcuffs. The steel bracelets gleamed in the afternoon light as they closed around Ethan's wrists. The fallen CEO, the man whose slap had sparked a movement, stumbled slightly as he was led away. His face, once the picture of corporate power, now showed nothing but naked fear and impotent rage. Through it all, Harold watched quietly, remembering countless nights of mopping floors under Ethan's contemptuous gaze. Now, in the same sunlight that had once streamed through Brightpath's windows, justice was finally being polished to a shine. The morning sun painted golden rectangles across the polished floors of the Whitaker Center for Workers' Rights, formerly Brightpath Systems. The transformation was more than cosmetic. Gone were the stark white walls and intimidating marble, replaced by warm earth tones and inspirational artwork created by local artists. Harold Whitaker moved his mop with practiced ease across the floor, the same methodical motion he'd used for decades. But now, employees smiled and greeted him by name as they passed. Some even stopped to chat, treating him with the respect that had been so long denied. The open plan office hummed with purposeful activity. Casually dressed staff worked at standing desks and gathered in small groups around coffee stations. The rigid hierarchy of the past, had given way to an atmosphere of collaboration and dignity. Dana Whitaker's voice carried clearly as she led a group of new employees through the space. She wore a simple blazer over jeans, the center's relaxed dress code reflecting its commitment to breaking down artificial barriers. "Welcome to orientation," she addressed the diverse group of fresh faces. "What happened in this building 2 years ago changed workplace culture across the country. We're here to make sure those changes stick." Harold paused his mopping, watching with quiet pride as his granddaughter guided the group toward the building's most prominent feature. A large display case mounted where Ethan Vale's portrait once hung. Inside, a high-definition still from the viral video captured the moment that had sparked a revolution. Ethan's hand connecting with Harold's face, office workers frozen in shocked silence. "This image traveled around the world," Dana explained, her voice carrying the weight of personal connection. But it wasn't just about one man's cruelty. It exposed a system that had normalized abuse and discrimination for generations. The new employees studied the photo intently. One young woman wiped away tears. Harold noticed how different their reactions were from the fear and averted gazes of the past. "Today, this center helps workers understand their rights," Dana continued. "We provide legal aid, job training, and support for anyone facing workplace discrimination or abuse. The $5 million in restitution from the Vale case funds our operations, turning one man's hate into a force for positive change." She led the group past a wall of news clippings chronicling BrightPath's collapse and the center's rise. Headlines captured the story. "CEO sentenced. BrightPath board resigns. Whitaker Center opens doors." Harold moved quietly alongside the tour, his mop creating perfect patterns on the floor. Some things hadn't changed. He still found peace in the rhythm of his work, still took pride in maintaining order. But now that work was valued, respected. Near the break room, Rosa Delgado chatted with a group of janitors during their morning meeting. As the center's facilities manager, she ensured every maintenance worker received fair pay, benefits, and dignity. She caught Harold's eye and smiled warmly. The tour reached a corner where Harold's old locker room had been. Now it was a bright meeting space, but one wall held a special display case. Dana gestured for her grandfather to join them. Harold leaned his mop against the wall and approached slowly, his movements deliberate as always. Inside the case, his old mop handle rested on velvet backing, worn smooth by years of use. Above it, a simple brass plaque read, "Dignity is not negotiable. Harold Whitaker, 2025. This mop handle, Dana told the group, was the only weapon my grandfather ever needed. His dignity and determination brought down an empire of corruption." Harold touched the glass gently, remembering. The handle had been in his hands when Ethan slapped him, when the security team beat him, when he finally fought back at the shareholders' gala. Through it all, he'd never lost his grip on his principles. A young janitor in the tour group spoke up. "Mr. Whitaker, I saw that video when I was still in high school. It made me realize I didn't have to accept being treated like I was nothing." Harold nodded, understanding the depth of that transformation. Around them, the office buzzed with activity, lawyers consulting with clients, training sessions in progress, support groups sharing stories. Every corner of the space now served a purpose greater than profit. Natural light flooded the cubicle area where Ethan had once stormed through spreading fear. Now, workers of all backgrounds collaborated freely, their conversations punctuated by occasional laughter. No one watched over their shoulders anymore. Dana concluded the tour near her office, once Ethan's domain of glass and marble. She'd converted it into a communal space where workers could meet with advocates and lawyers. The power dynamics had been literally restructured, the architecture itself reformed to serve justice. Harold retrieved his mop and resumed his work, moving between the cubicles with the same quiet dignity he'd always possessed. But now each stroke of the mop felt different, not an act of servitude, but one of stewardship. He was maintaining a space where respect flourished and rights were protected. He paused near a window, looking out at the city skyline. The same sun that had once witnessed his humiliation now illuminated a transformed workplace. The floors still needed cleaning. The garbage still needed collecting. The essential work still had to be done. But now that work carried honor, and the workers carried their heads high. Harold gazed around at the bright cubicles, at the respectful silence of focused work, at the natural order that emerges when people treat each other with dignity. A gentle smile crossed his face as he whispered, "Now it shines for the right reasons." I hope you enjoyed that story. Please share it with your friends, and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.